Every single year, there's this one meeting, a really important one, that decides how much millions of people in Taiwan get in their paychecks. We're talking about the annual minimum wage debate. And today, well, we're going to take you right inside that room to see how it all goes down.
So, let's start with a number, $2,470,000. Just let that sink in for a second. What do you think that is? It's not a city's budget, it's not some abstract statistic, it's people.
That's right. The income for nearly 2.5 million workers hangs in the balance of one single high-stakes meeting that happens just once a year. This one decision sets the absolute rock bottom for what someone can get paid for their work.
I mean, have you ever wondered what actually goes on in there? Who's in the room? What do they even talk about? And how in the world do they land on that one magic number that could end up on your payslip? Well, today, we are pulling back the curtain.
First things first, this yearly showdown isn't just some informal get-together anymore. As of 2024, there's a brand new rulebook, the Minimum Wage Act. And this is a huge deal because it turned the whole process from a simple guideline into a formal, binding law with some real teeth.
So what's the big deal here? Well, under the old system, the decision was kind of like a strong suggestion. Now, with this new law, it is legally binding. And check out the penalties. We're talking up to 1.5 million TWD, and maybe, what's even worse for a company's reputation, getting publicly named and shamed if they don't comply. So yeah, the stakes are way, way higher now.
Okay, let's picture the scene. The negotiation room is basically a face-off between two very different teams, with a bunch of referees and experts sitting in the middle trying to keep things fair. On one side of the table, you've got the people who get the paychecks, and on the other, you've got the people who sign them.
And here's the lineup. The whole thing is decided by a 21-member committee. You've got 7 people representing team worker, and an equal 7 for team business to keep things balanced. Playing referee, you've got 3 government officials, including the Minister of Labor. And then you have 4 academic scholars to bring in all the data and expert opinions.
This quote from a labor rep really gets to the core of team workers' entire argument. For them, this isn't about profit margins. It's about putting food on the table. It's about survival. You know, when the price of rent and groceries goes up, the lowest paid workers feel it the most. Their point is simple. A wage has to be enough to actually live on.
But then you listen to team business and you get a completely different story. They're saying, hold on, those great economic numbers you see on the news, that's all driven by a few massive tech companies. They argue that most of the small businesses, the restaurants, the local shops, the traditional factories that actually hire most minimum wage workers, they're the ones who are really struggling to survive.
And this gets us to the very heart of the debate. It all boils down to this big tug of war between two key economic numbers that the new law requires the committee to look at. Let's break them down.
Okay, first up is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The easiest way to think about this is just the cost of living. It's the number that officially tracks how much more expensive your groceries, your rent, your bus ticket have gotten in the last year. This number, this is the pressure of survival that Team Worker was talking about.
The other big number is GDP, or Gross Domestic Product. Think of this like the country's overall economic report card. If GDP is going up, it means the economy is growing and there's more money and more wealth being created. The huge question in that room is, how do you share that new wealth fairly? Now, this chart does a great job of showing team business's main point. They're saying, sure, the overall GDP number looks good, but that growth is totally lopsided. High-tech exports are through the roof, but the traditional industries, the service sector, the places that employ most minimum wage workers, they're either stagnant or struggling. So you've got these two sides, and they seem miles apart, right? One group is staring at their rising grocery bills, the other is staring at their struggling balance sheets. After hours and hours of debate, how do they finally agree on a number? Well, it turns out they've found a formula. And the breakthrough came down to this number right here, 1.76%. That was the official projection for the rise in the Consumer Price Index, the cost of living. And on this point, everyone agreed. Whatever else happened, the wage increase had to at least cover this so that workers' buying power wouldn't actually go down. This was the non-negotiable starting point. So here's how they turned that one number into the final formula. It's actually pretty logical when you break it down. First, step 1, you have to cover that cost of living increase, that 1.76%, no question. Then comes the tricky part, step 2.
how do you share the economic growth? You know, the GDP. After a lot of back and forth, they agreed to tack on a piece of that growth, about a third of the projection. You add those two things together, and boom, you've got your final balanced number.
And here it is. Starting January 1st, 2026, the new monthly minimum wage will be 29,500 new Taiwan dollars. That's a jump of $910 from the year before.
And let's not forget the millions of part-time workers. For them, the hourly minimum wage is also going up to 19.6 TWD. This is huge for students, shift workers, and so many people in the service industry.
Okay, so a bigger number is nice, but what does that actually look like in your bank account at the end of the month? Let's take a look at a sample paycheck to see the real-world impact.
So here's a simple before and after. Your gross pay, the top line number, goes up to $29,500. But don't forget, your contributions to things like labor and health insurance are a percentage of your salary. So when your salary goes up, those deductions go up a tiny bit too. So at the end of the day, your actual take-home pay goes up by about $864 a month.
Now, whenever the minimum wage changes, the same questions always seem to pop up. So let's do a quick-fire Q&A session and tackle some of the most common ones.
Okay, first question. My salary is already over $29,500. Does my boss have to give me a raise? The short answer is no. This law only sets the absolute minimum. Next, can my boss take out money for rent or food from this salary? Nope, absolutely not. Third, I'm a foreign worker. Does this apply to me? If you're an industrial worker in a factory, yes. But for domestic caregivers, their minimum is actually set under a different agreement. And finally, what happens if my boss just doesn't pay? Well, remember that new law? It means business. We're talking huge fines and getting publicly called out.
So, to wrap this all up, the wage went up. And that's a very direct way to help the lowest paid workers keep up with rising prices. But those worries from team business are still very real. They're concerned this extra cost might just get passed on to you and me through higher prices, or that it could make small businesses think twice before hiring someone new.
And that leaves us with the big, complicated question that just hangs over this whole debate year after year. The number on the paycheck went up, which is great for the worker. But in an economy where everything is connected, who really ends up paying for it? Is it the business owner with smaller profits? Is it us, the consumers, with higher prices? Or is it maybe even other workers with fewer jobs available? That's the real million-dollar question to think about. Thanks for joining us.